There's a man you've never seen. He doesn't lead a country, he doesn't run a company, but he controls everything. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, even the president, they all move inside a system. And this man owns that system. You won't find him on magazine covers, but behind every financial decision, every corporate move, every market shift, he's there. And today, you'll see how he took control. Quietly, completely, without anyone noticing. This is the man who owns the world. In 1988, a small team of finance veterans launched a firm on the 20th floor of an anonymous Manhattan office. No big headlines, no IPO, just a few desks, some terminals, and a radical idea. They called it BlackRock. From the beginning, BlackRock wasn't just another asset manager. It was designed to be something different, something invisible. While Wall Street giants chased headlines, BlackRock chased infrastructure. It didn't want attention, it wanted access. In the early 90s, when most firms focused on flashy trades, BlackRock was building pipelines, financial pipelines, quiet ones. It offered to manage other people's money, pension funds, sovereign wealth, insurance pools, not for fame, but for information. And that's the first secret. BlackRock doesn't need to own everything directly. If it manages everything, it sees everything. If it sees everything, it controls what matters. By 2004, BlackRock was quietly overseeing hundreds of billions in assets. No ads, no celebrities, no controversy. Then came the merger that changed everything. In 2009, during the heart of the financial crisis, BlackRock absorbed Barclays Global Investors, and with it, iShares, the largest ETF platform in the world. Overnight, BlackRock became the world's biggest money manager. The media called it a new giant on Wall Street. They were wrong. This wasn't a giant, this was a shadow state. Because now, BlackRock didn't just manage money, it managed the structure of the markets themselves. ETFs meant passive control, quiet dominance. It owned slices of every major company, Apple, Amazon, Google, JP Morgan, not to steer them, but to watch them, and to shape the environment they live in. Today, BlackRock manages more than $10 trillion. That's larger than the GDP of Germany and Japan combined. If BlackRock were a country, it'd be the third largest economy on Earth. But here's the twist. BlackRock doesn't technically own anything. It just holds the power behind the scenes. Its influence isn't loud, it's systemic. It doesn't shout orders, it designs incentives. CEOs return its calls. Governments ask its advice. Regulators avoid its wrath. Because no one wants to fight the man who owns the map. And at the center of it all, one man, one name, who designed this silent empire from day one, Larry Fink. But we'll get to him soon, because first you need to understand the machine he built. They named it Aladdin. Not a fairy tale genie, not a kid's movie, but the most powerful financial surveillance system ever created. Most people think Wall Street is run by people in suits, but the truth is, today it's run by a black box with access to nearly every financial transaction on Earth. And BlackRock built it. In the early 1990s, while competitors fought over market share, Larry Fink was focused on one thing: risk. He believed the next frontier of finance wasn't in the trade, it was in the prediction. So he created a tool that could simulate crises before they happened. Aladdin, short for Asset, Liability, Debt, and Derivative Investment Network, began as a risk management tool, a calculator, but it grew into something else entirely. Today, Aladdin watches over $21 trillion in assets. That's double what BlackRock manages directly. Because here's the twist. Other firms, competitors, even governments now depend on Aladdin. JP Morgan, Citi, Vanguard, the Federal Reserve. They all plug into BlackRock's brain. Aladdin tracks over 5,000 portfolios in real time. It analyzes 250 million calculations per week. It processes more data than the NSA. And it doesn't just watch, it learns. It sees how markets react to war, to elections, to tweets. It simulates what would happen if a bond fails in Brazil, or a tech stock crashes in China. Then it adjusts the system accordingly. Before you blink, it's already moved the money. Now ask yourself, if one algorithm can predict and adjust the behavior of the world's biggest funds, who's really making the decisions? Traders, presidents, or a self-teaching machine operated from a room in Manhattan? BlackRock doesn't just own stakes in Apple or Microsoft. Through Aladdin, it owns the flow of capital. If it wants to raise or sink a stock, it knows how. If it wants to avoid a crisis, it moves first because it sees it first. This isn't a tool anymore. It's an empire of influence, without fingerprints. And almost no one outside the system even knows it exists. But here's the real twist. Aladdin isn't just watching the markets, it's starting to shape them. Because when everyone follows the same model, the model becomes the market. And BlackRock owns the model. In March 2020, the world stopped. Markets crashed, borders closed. Panic spread faster than any virus. Within hours, trillions were wiped from global portfolios. The US government had one question: who can save the system? They didn't call the White House. They didn't call Goldman Sachs. They called BlackRock. Within days, BlackRock was hired not to consult, but to run the crisis response. Through emergency mandates, the Federal Reserve gave BlackRock direct authority to buy corporate bonds, mortgage-backed securities, even entire ETFs. But here's the twist. Some of those ETFs, they were BlackRock's own products. That's right. BlackRock was authorized to spend taxpayer money to purchase its own assets and get paid fees to do it. It was no longer just managing portfolios, it was managing the recovery of capitalism itself. And it wasn't the first time. Back in 2008, during the subprime meltdown, the same thing happened. The US Treasury brought in BlackRock to clean up after Lehman Brothers. The European Central Bank did the same in 2011. Again and again, during the worst financial collapses of the 21st century, governments turned not to elected leaders, but to Larry Fink, the man behind the curtain. He advised presidents, attended G7 meetings, shaped the rules that others had to follow. But here's what most don't realize. BlackRock is not a neutral player. It owns stakes in the very banks it was asked to supervise. It holds influence over the companies it's hired to rescue. It advises central banks while simultaneously profiting from their policies. There is no separation of church and state here, just a revolving door, and BlackRock holds the keys. Critics call it a conflict of interest. Insiders call it the most efficient system ever built. Because when crises hit, speed matters, and no one moves faster than BlackRock. But ask yourself, if a private firm becomes the first responder for global capitalism, who's really in charge? The government, or the one they call when things fall apart? That's the question they don't want you asking. And it leads us to the next piece of the puzzle. Because BlackRock's power doesn't come from government. It comes from ownership. But not the kind you think. Ownership. It sounds simple. You buy shares, you own part of a company. But BlackRock rewrote the rules. Because it doesn't need to own companies outright to control their destiny. It just needs to hold, enough passively. And through its vast network of index funds and ETFs, that's exactly what it does. Today, BlackRock is a top shareholder in 90% of the S&P 500. Apple, Google, Amazon, Meta, Pfizer, Exxon. In nearly every boardroom, BlackRock has a seat, even if no one sees it. But here's the brilliance. It claims it doesn't control anything. Why? Because the shares it holds aren't really theirs. They're held on behalf of clients, pension funds, governments, universities. So when regulators ask, "Do you have influence over corporate decisions?" BlackRock can say, "We're just stewards of capital." But in practice, that stewardship shapes everything, from CEO compensation packages to climate policy to whether a company goes woke, stays silent, or disappears. They publish guidelines, and those guidelines quietly become policy. Because when you manage $10 trillion, your opinion becomes law. And they don't even need to shout. Just a quiet letter, a shareholder vote, a change in weighting on a global index, and the market moves. BlackRock doesn't lobby companies. Companies anticipate BlackRock. It's influence without confrontation, power without risk. And the best part? Most people have no idea. Ask the average investor where their money is, they'll say, "My retirement fund." But that fund likely runs through BlackRock. Millions of people unknowingly granting one company voting power over the entire economy. And it's not just private corporations. Through ETFs and index funds, BlackRock holds government bonds, utilities, defense contractors, tech infrastructure. It owns the pipes of the system, not to change them directly, but to ensure the water keeps flowing through its hands. This is ownership by design. Not loud, not flashy, but deep, systemic, unquestioned. Because the moment BlackRock moves out of a stock, the stock drops. When it moves in, everyone follows. It doesn't need a throne. It controls the architecture of power. And while others chase headlines, BlackRock shapes the landscape those headlines exist in. But even that is only half the story. Because behind this empire of silence stands the man who built it. It's time to meet him. His name is Larry Fink. Not exactly a household name, but that's the point. Because while other billionaires chase headlines, Fink built an empire in the shadows. No Twitter rants, no space rockets, no flashy yachts. Just influence, deep, quiet, unshakable. He was born in 1952 in California, middle-class family, modest beginnings. He studied political science, then finance. In 1986, after losing $100 million in a single trade at First Boston, he learned a lesson most on Wall Street ignore. Control the risk, and you control the system. That loss wasn't his downfall. It was his blueprint. 2 years later, he founded BlackRock, not to chase alpha, but to manage risk for others. He understood that the real power in finance isn't in winning bets, it's in being the house. By managing trillions, Fink inserted himself into every major institution in the world quietly. He built relationships with central banks, prime ministers, Fortune 500 CEOs. Not as an outsider, but as the one they depend on. He's been invited to the White House under both Democratic and Republican administrations. He speaks at Davos, not as a guest, but as a guide. He doesn't ask for access, he is the access. And yet, his name rarely appears in headlines. Because Larry Fink doesn't want fame, he wants influence. Each year, he writes a letter to CEOs, and the market listens. He pushes for ESG reform, for climate strategy, for governance standards. Some call it progress, others call it manipulation. Because when the man who controls $10 trillion says jump, the economy jumps. But here's the paradox. Larry Fink doesn't need to enforce anything. He creates the environment that makes enforcement unnecessary. His letters become law not through regulation, but through anticipation. He's not elected, he's not questioned, he's not even seen. He's the architect of a financial world most people will never understand, and yet live in every single day. You can vote for a president, you can protest a policy, but you can't vote out Larry Fink, because he doesn't work within the system. He is the system. And for decades, he's been building it, piece by piece, until the world woke up one day and realized it was his. You've heard of Tesla, Apple, Amazon. You've heard of Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg. But you've never heard of BlackRock or Larry Fink. And that's not an accident. Because BlackRock doesn't need your attention. It needs your silence. The media? BlackRock holds stakes in Comcast, Disney, Warner Bros., Fox, and even News Corp. It owns part of the platforms, part of the publishers, part of the message. And what it doesn't own, it partners with. The result? A system where the most powerful financial force on Earth stays invisible. No documentaries, no headlines, no scandals. Just smooth, systemic control. And if anyone asks too many questions, they're called conspiracy theorists. Until the next bailout, the next crisis, the next silent rescue. But here's the truth. The greatest power today isn't held by politicians. It's held by those who fund them. And BlackRock doesn't fund one side. It funds every side. That's how you win. By owning the table, not playing the game. Most people think capitalism is chaotic. It's not. It's choreographed by algorithms, by incentives, by unseen hands. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So now you know. There is a man who owns no country but shapes them all, who controls no army but decides where money flows, who commands no spotlight but whose shadow covers everything. His name is Larry Fink, and BlackRock is the empire he built, brick by brick, quietly, efficiently, completely. So now you've seen what they were never supposed to show you. Not a theory, not a guess, but the architecture of control, hiding in plain sight. If this opened your eyes, imagine what's coming next. This channel is built to expose what the system hides, the real stories, the real power, the real playbook. So if you want more, subscribe now. Like the video to push this message further, because the more people know, the harder it is to stay in the dark. This is just the beginning.